Frontline Gaming presents 40k Stat Center with your hosts Val Heffelfinger and the Falcon.
What team takes the top prize when the elite meet to treat at the American Team Championships?
Meanwhile, we take it down to Texas, where even GSC and Demon Princes lay down their knives and pick up their guns.
With ETC on the way, we enjoy tea time with Team England to learn what makes them tick.
Falcone is away, Tony's here to play.
Oh, hi, Tony.
What's up, Val?
You know, normally in the show notes I spell out Falcone, because I feel like that gives him more of a criminal element.
Yeah, I would too, but it just kind of rhymed with my name, so I went with it.
Now, Tony, I think a lot of listeners, they probably don't know that they know you.
If anybody follows the Monday morning reports, I put out through Biff Pod. That's probably how you know me, Antonio Pierce on Facebook.
And secretly, also on Reddit. Do we want to out your Reddit name?
Oh, sure. I've made no secret of who I am. Sir Panda Pants on Reddit, Pandasaurus Rex elsewhere, various panda-related handles around the internet.
I didn't know that, and that makes things even better. You know, you're an enterprising up-and-coming TO down in the southeast. I guess you're in North Carolina?
In Charlotte, North Carolina. Had a little hiccup this year with the Carolina Crusade, but we've already started working on making that better and making sure it doesn't happen again next year.
Look, I wasn't trying to bait you out, but that did seem almost like a reflexive response at this point, and it's all good in the hood, buddy. Like I thought that was all well handled at the end of the day, and we didn't take you off the roster because, quite frankly, we got no one else.
Well, I'm always happy to help where I can.
So thank you for being here. We have one heck of a show. This is probably going to be the longest show that we've done to date. I know some people have asked for a consistent show length, but I went to the Pablo School of Podcasting, and it's going to be long and strong. The only difference is I'm not going to say that this is going to be a short episode because we've got a lot of ground to cover.
You guys have been doing such a great job. It's such a great sounding podcast. You're probably one of the best ones coming out the gate. How are you guys doing on the money side?
Hold on to your butt. You just triggered a hot and heavy Heffeltorial.
I appreciate you giving me that lead in there, Tony. I've been noticing out on the internets that folks seem to believe that we're in this for the dollars. And yes, my 40k team may or may not be Cash Money Hammer, but that's all from outside of the podcast. You see, here on the show, we're not monetized. All right, guys, we don't make any dollars. There's no direct Patreon. There's no ad funding. Something you guys might not realize is all of the ads that have been produced by our man Keith, the guy who has the awesome radio jock voice. These have all come out of our pocket, and really what this show is about is producing good content that covers the tournament scene, because both Peter and I love it. It wouldn't really be possible without some of the important, pillars of this community. That includes Best Coast Pairings, who have a pretty sweet produced ad plug-in here, the ITC itself, and we plug their Patreon. You wouldn't know who I am nor Peter if it wasn't for our friend Pablo on Chapter Tactics, who does have a Patreon that we plug. And then all of the other bumpers that we have are people who produce content, who are either prominent characters in the community. And yes, some of them have paywalls, and some of them are trying to make a buck or support themselves off of 40k. And we're all for it. We love it. So that's what the show's about. It's about highlighting not only, the people who make this game fun and interesting and produce content for all of us to enjoy, but it's also about highlighting the players, the tournament goers, to show that they're regular people. They're not jerks, to try and dispel some of those myths in the community. In other shows, not this one, but we do have TOs to give them a moment to talk about their event and really highlight themselves and the work that they put in. Finally, the Frontline Gaming Network and Frontline Gaming itself. I don't think we would have a tournament scene like we do if it wasn't for the work of the ITC. Frontline Gaming, Reese, Frankie, Pablo, Jason, everybody there, in addition to their actual business, run a pretty cool thing that we all get to participate in. And so if we can do anything to promote this, maybe pay forward a bit of the endless amount of joy, and if we can do it a little bit, if we can help out a little bit and get people's names out there, then I think we've done what we set out to do. Hopefully people who actually do spend their lives dedicated to having an awesome competitive scene maybe do make a few bucks because of this show. So that's my spiel.
Doing it for the love of the game. Val, I agree with you 100%. I wouldn't be in it without FLG. I would never have joined the scene without a standardization. And I would never have started doing my own Monday reports without Best Coast Pairing.
And hopefully you guys enjoy the content, irrespective of the agenda we push. And we're scene agnostic too. I don't think that, things being ITC ranked or ITC format or ETC format or standard missions out of the book, I don't think any of those things make a particular tournament more or less competitive or better in some way than another. I think it just comes down to the players, who showed up that day, and ultimately who has the best day on the table. So yeah, that's that. Wanted to also plug, speaking of plugs, wanted to mention Pablo's show this week, Chapter Tactics. Check it out. We're going to do ATC coverage, obviously, but they have a real stonker of a show with Juice. Stephen Four comes on from the Wobbly Gentleman this year. Jeff in Control Robinson from Team Zero Comp at the ATC. Scary, who was playing with the Wrong Way Kids, my friend Paul Murphy's team. Those guys are on with Pablo Martinez guiding the discussion. It's a really, really good one. Another one I want to shout out, actually, as we get into some tournaments that are coming up. One, in Toronto last weekend, we had the Hogtowner, which is a narrative-driven spiritual successor probably to the Astronomicon tournament that used to be popular in these parts. It's more of a hobby-focused tournament or event. And they had a really, really good showing. 40 people, just an outstanding event, won by the Orcs. We won't cover it in detail, but just want to make sure that they got some love because they did an absolutely great job with it. Despite it being the weekend before TGX, TGX is probably a major. And so thanks to everyone. We've got some Americans flying up. We've got guys driving from very far around the neighborhood in this little part of Canada. It's going to be great. We're sitting right at 67 players, and one of them is named Marjorie and hasn't uploaded their list. So don't know if that's a real person or not. So hopefully 66. Everyone else, lists are in. They were in a very Canadian and orderly fashion, all uploaded on time, which was fantastic. It's going to be great. That one goes down this weekend. Starts on Friday with a little Adepticon-style team tournament, and then goes into the singles, which will be streamed on Scaredcast. Or Scaredcast, whatever Scary's channel is on Twitch. We'll be streaming the games once they start. And they start pretty early on Saturday. I'm the TO. I should know this. I think 8:30, maybe 9, something like that, Eastern time. Should be a great one. And no matter what happens next week, because there's like 100 tournaments, we'll be leading off with the coverage of TGX. We've got some big hitters, Stephen Pamprine, TJ Lanigan, Devin Swan, some guy named Jim Vessel. That's like a lot of the top 10 right there. It's going to be pretty huge. You got anything to plug?
I think Battle for Salvation is hosting an event in October, as well as Warhammer guys down in Florida, Crucible 8. Both of those are majors. And then also Battle for Salvation is doing an ATC-esque team event next April in New York. So check it out.
Yeah, the Battle for Salvation in the fall. I've always wanted to actually run the stats on it because I feel like it's got to be one of the most evil fields in sort of a GT-sized tournament that there could be. It's always draws, obviously, a ton of Beast Coast guys. It's just a murderer's row of players, just high concentration of really, really good players. So, yeah, if you want to test your mettle, check out Battle for Salvation GT, and I'm super pumped to hear that they got that team tournament thing going. All right, well, I think that's enough talking up tournaments and other stuff. Why don't we hit a bump?
Tournament news is made possible by BestCoastPairings.com. Download the BCP TO app to organize events for just about any tabletop game system. Download the player app to easily find and participate in events from around the world. Subscribe to BCP for as little as $5 a month to support the team and unlock additional features. Available for iOS and Android. BestCoastPairings.com. Competitive events easier.
Our first stop brings us to East Ridge, Tennessee, a small town that has suffered ever since Chattanooga got the choo-choo station. The American Team Championships, I apologize, I think it's probably pronounced, The American Team Championships is a club-based team tournament allowing for you and your 4 closest pals to sign up and lose to one of the 10 million Beast Coast teams. Each team of 5 intrepid souls, having braved the Smoky Mountains or the barren wasteland of whatever's west of Tennessee, then sets out to do miniature combat over 6 hotly contested rounds. This attracted 85 teams, making it not only the largest team event in the world by a country mile, but also one of the biggest period at 425 sweaty nerds strong. Now, as with last year, the tournament used the ITC mission pack, and each codex or source could only be used once per team. The result was a meta that didn't seem to faze many of the top teams at the end of day 3.
You know, Val, I gotta tell you that the meta is exactly what we thought it would be. The appropriate amount of Tau, GSC sprinkled in along with some orcs, the Austin Wingfield, Triple Lord Discord, and Morty style of list chaos armies were everywhere. The top tables were littered with Eldar mech, just like we assumed, whether it's Wave Serpent chassis in that style or the Eldar flyers. I don't think there was really any surprises coming out of ATC whatsoever.
Of course, that was Steven Juice 4, and now let's switch over to Sean Naden from Quality Control.
The meta didn't surprise us too much. We had, inside information on many of the teams that we work with and talk with on their players, so we weren't that surprised by the meta overall. Our Knight player felt that if he had brought more of a horde list, it might have helped more in pairings, but we got, up until the final round, we got a lot of work out of that Knight list in many of our matchups, so it wasn't that much of a loss.
And then finally, let's hear what Ruben Fernandez had to say. I believe he's playing on Brohammer?
Yeah.
For us, the meta, ATC is always weird just because of the fact that the skews are so hard. In our case, we had the 3 Orions. Wobbly Gentleman had the 3 Shadow Swords, which we were honestly pretty scared of as a team. Other flyers were in almost every team. That was kind of a given, so it's not a surprise. Yeah.
Inspiring words from some excellent players. Now, obviously, Tony, you were in attendance there, so we had boots on the ground here, an actual on-the-scene correspondent. So why don't you tell us a little bit? Why don't you set the scene a little bit for us? What was the venue like?
So it's held at Camp Jordan in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's a 34,000 square foot facility with no AC, where the Southerners reveled in the heat and the Northerners suffered.
Okay, all right. So they were trying to make light of this lack of AC coming into the event, because this is what I've heard of ATC, is that it is hot. So you're telling me that it was perhaps a dastardly ploy by the Southerners to screw with the Northern folk?
Maybe, but that's only lasted for another year or so. Next year, they're supposedly going to be in a hotel with actual AC.
All right. So what about the terrain scene?
Terrain was mediocre to bad. I think there may be 4 or 5 tables total with what would be considered heavy terrain. Most of the medium tables had 1 or 2 line of sight blockers or large walls that from the wrong angle blocked nothing at all. The barren tables were pretty barren, but the mediocre tables honestly would reflect any given tournament on any given day that anyone goes to, so it's not anything anybody can be really surprised about.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you're going to get a lot of variability in terrain, obviously, any place that you go, and as long as the tables were consistent, then no one has any particular advantage. That is one of the troubles with singles events. If you have a big disparity in table density, then, you got to get luck of the draw there. Not going to happen at TGX, I'll tell you, I hope. Now, one place that definitely had some pretty solid table setups, I think, were the stream tables that were highlighted on the Pro Tabletop inaugural stream. What were your thoughts? Did you get to catch any of the footage now that the event's over?
Oh, yeah, I got to go back through and watch all of the games. Pro Tabletop did an outstanding job. The only real complaint is maybe jumping between the tables when action starts getting really, really good. But other than that, I thought their graphical layout was really well. I liked the way that they did the scoring system and the way that they showed it to the viewers. Yeah. I thought it was really, really good. The only other thing I think they could benefit from is maybe having someone in the field, kind of like Honest Wargamer. We're going between tables.
Kenny Boucher, Rob Bear of Spiky Bits and the Long War, they were, by the looks of it, going between tables and then coming back with updates periodically. So for the most part, what you had was footage of basically the game being played with mic'd players sort of talking through it. So I think that works to an extent, but I think if you really want the whole package, you should have guys in the booth, like you got your Jim Nance sitting there or whatever, and, that person with the color analyst always talking, occasionally going to the table for maybe a big moment if someone picks up on it, and then having guys, like you said, on the Honest Wargamer, having guys coming back with, a voiceover and reports talking through some of the details. But I think as a proof of concept, it was brilliant. I think it's amazing what can happen when you've got a professional caliber production team running that stream. And I think sky's the limit for really how engaging you could make it and how interesting you can make it, especially too in a singles environment where it's actually every table's kind of against one another. Of course, we're lucky to have you here, Tony. So you were actually on Abusement Park, and perhaps, like Icarus, flew a little too close to that sun. Now, briefly, what types of lists did Abusement Park bring to the ATC?
So I was playing TJ Lanigan's Chaos list with the Blightlord Terminators and the Thousand Suns bomb. Chris brought his 9 Flyers. We had the King Josh Roberts playing his Death Watch, Blood Angels, and Assassins. Damian Owen out of Atlanta playing his Pure Admech with a Rizza Destroyer Bomb and 2 drills full of Priests with Rave Sticks. And then Eddie Kraft himself with triple Caladius, triple Tank Commanders, and a Crass Crusader.
That is lovely. So, all right, you got your Wrecking Crew with, you kind of glossed over this, Team England captain, the Dread Pirate, Josh Roberts, no less. You've got one of the best team names in the business, Abusement Park. What happens?
All right, so round 1, we face off against Omega. These guys are not tournament players, but they're very, very good on the hobby side. I played against a gorgeous Eldar army, but we got a 5-0 win out of that. Round 2, we played versus Flying Monkey. I got the pleasure to play Bam himself from the Flying Monkey podcast. Took him down, and we got 4-1 win out of that. Round 3, we played Beat Slab Gaming, some friends of ours from Raleigh, a little north of Charlotte. Very, very fun games. Got to hang out, got to see the power of the Kevin Roach list. We got another 4-1 win out of that. And then our round 4 versus the Battle for Salvation, I got to play Ed Miller's Double Castellan list, which I won by killing things in only 1 round and then sitting back and holding objectives for the rest of the game.
Very nice. Little shout out to the Kevin Roach list. We're going to go in depth on that. Kevin Roach winding up with the, best battle point score for the tournament outside of all the team stuff. Now, you get to round 5. You've officially hit T-Whip because, you're 4-0. That's a patented stat around these parts. Who do you draw?
So we come up next against Quality Control, Naden's team.
Oh boy, QC, Quality Control. These guys have been around for quite some time. Can you provide a quick summary? What kind of stuff was Quality Control running this week?
Sure. We had Dallas Rappaport was running Kraken Gene Stealers and Gene Stealer Cult. Andrew Rubino was playing another Chaos list with Zangors instead of Blightlords. We had Dan Woods was playing 3 Knights. I think Tyrannus, 4 Knights maybe? 2 Gallants and a Castellan, if I'm recalling correctly. Kurt Klaus was playing Eldar Flyers, and Sean Naden was playing a usual Sean Naden elf list that nobody has any idea what it does.
I still don't think, and there are a lot of, we'll get into some of the other podcasts that are covering ATC, and I don't think I've heard anyone even bother highlighting the full list. And we've got way too much to talk about, so we're not going to do it either. What happens to Abusement Park? Eddie
got Naden, just pure and simple. Started off with a heavy lead, but Sean Naden was able to bring it back for a 30-17 win. I got just dominated by Dallas, just at the hands of an expert Gene Stealer and Tyranid player. Chris loses by a couple points to Andrew Robino. I think Josh narrowly pulls it out over Dan Woods, and Damian beats Kurt by, I think, 1 point after a lovely little bromance on stream. But the point differential between Naden, Eddie, and Dallas and myself got their victory.
Very nice. Yeah, so it was 145 to 118. Abusement Park gets abused. So round 5, still working our way through. We've got the Wobbly Gentleman They take on the Gentle Hogs. Wobbly Gentleman is basically Team America plus Austin Wingfield, who's also kind of on Team America. You got Kelsey Haley running Triple Shadow Sword. You've got Juice running a version anyway of his Gene Stealer cult list, I believe. We've got the obviously the Wingfield Mortarian Triple Discordance lists that's been tearing up the South and the West Coast in the hands of Jeff Robinson. What else were they running?
Brad Chester was running Eldar. I can't remember if he was running Flyers or not. I think he was. And then we had the one surprise of the entire meta, Nick Rose and 300 Grots. Not Grotesques, Orc Grots.
I think it was 240. I might be splitting hairs here. I also might be totally wrong. But yeah, Nick Rose's list is super fascinating. A lot of people wondering how the heck are you moving around all those Grots. He had them on some of the coolest movement trays I've ever seen. They kind of had these little pegs that came out of them, so you can move them all in groups of 5. So he was moving it, and was pretty lights out for them by all accounts in the tournament. As is tradition around these parts, let's talk to a couple of the members of the Wobbly Gentlemen and get some of their takes on their MVP. We're gonna kick it off with Austin here.
Best unit for me is Mortarion for the weekend. He just soaks up so much damage and lets me win games. And he performs so well, makes some clutch charges, tie stuff up, kill everything, blow up on everything. He is a blast, and can't say enough about him.
Big shocker there, Mortarion. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard him talk about him before. Let's swing it on over to Juice.
Best unit, hands down, in my opinion, is a 20-man unit of Acolytes with a banner and 7 rock sauce. That unit does all the Lord's work. It allows for any buff in my army basically to be able to put into this unit. They can hit on 2s, reroll 1s, be strength 1 billion with +1 to wound. And if my Primus is around, I will be getting a +1 or reroll 1s to wound against a certain target that I picked. So if I truly want, this unit can get hit on 2s, reroll 1s, wound on 2s, reroll 1s with extra attacks. I mean, pretty damn powerful.
Yeah, that the praise for that unit goes all the way back to Adepticon, where he was playing it on the top table, obviously against Jim Vessel. It's cool how a lot of these guys have just been running the same old stuff for a long while here. And let's wrap it up with Kelsey. He's going to have, I think, a pretty surprising MVP from his list.
I mean, obviously the best unit for me was the company commander. That's a total lie. It's the Shadow Swords. I mean, I don't know how you could say anything else when that's about 1,700 points of your army, and it makes the opponent pick up his army. I mean, there's nothing else to say.
There's nothing else to say. One little piece of tech from Kelsey's list that maybe made the Shadow Swords a little spicier than even usually is the Trojan support vehicle. So re-rolling hits for, I guess, up to 2 of those Shadow Swords, which is a big deal, especially if you run into -1 a hit or something. Did you see a lot of, I mean, this was kind of a meme list for, I'd say about a year ago. About a year ago, team tournaments, you would have seen a ton of the triple Shadow Sword. This year, I'm not sure if you did. Did you see them around?
There were a couple skew lists like this. It was mostly to put the fear of God into all the Chaos players, fear of the Emperor, as it were. I know we had plans that if we were to go up against that, I was to dodge it at all costs.
Yeah, it's actually listening to them sort of go through in more detail. The Wobbly Gentlemen were pretty surprised at how often like Bash Bros would get fed into those other sort of big heavy hitting lists with big juicy targets for those Shadow Swords to feast on. Kelsey also hilariously went first 5 out of 6 games, and he happened to I believe win 5 out of 6 games. So Wobbly Gentlemen in the 5th round still, they take down the Gentle Hogs. 154 to 130. So that's actually kind of squeaking it through. Do we see anything in the matchups?
Looking at it right now, Brad Chester versus Alan Baramovich.
DJ Pants.
Kelsey Haley versus Ryan O. Juice versus Elliot Levy. Nick Rose versus Trent Northington. And Austin versus Steve Pampreen. I did not get the scores from those individual games. Yeah, I'm assuming this is a 4-1 win. It doesn't look like a large enough margin. Oh no, it is a large enough margin to get them to win, even on a 3-2.
So Gentle Hogs go down. Tip of the cap to Stephen Pampreen there. He ran Gene Stealer Cults because he gave it up to PJ Pants to run the Orcs, and I think he suffered for that decision. You want to run. You want to run the one you love. Steve took it for the team this tournament. Didn't go so well. That's sort of the end of their story. He'll be competing at TGX, everybody, this weekend, live on stream. We'll see what happens. Finally, Brohammer, Florida men. They beat Smite Club. Pretty devastating. Do we know what Brohammer was running?
So we had John Lennon, who was running his GSC, I think double aberrant list. We had Richard Siegler, who's running his Tau. Richard Martin was running 3 Orion assault gunships. By the way, they do not have the Titanic keyword. We had Ruben Fernandez running Eldar Flyers and Mark Perry running Chaos.
Okay, so let's just hear from a couple Brohammer members about their MVP units for the weekend.
So for me, the best unit in my army, it's no question, Crimson Hunter XRX are excellent. They're it's consistent damage output. Even if I go second and they die, usually only 1 or 2 will die, and then they soak up an entire army's shooting phase. So yeah, they're excellent. Honorable mention to Nightwings and Night Spinners. Night Spinners are fantastic for 112 points. As are Nightwings. Really, they're always the last things to be shot at, and damage output is always very consistent.
Ruben Fernandez with a little hot tip there for Alex Harrison. Let's kick it over to Mark Perry. He's a good old boy, and here's his MVP.
Best unit in the game, probably MVP. I mean, like the Morty, the whole list synergizes really well with pressure. But a unit that did a lot of work for me was probably that one World Eater Warpsmith between denying psychic powers, taking the World Eater's relic to get a deny, and perils. And as soon as you perils, I make you take 2d3 mortals instead of 1. Best play is coming up with the next part.
Mark Burpin, what a clip. And then finally, we're going to kick it over to the one, the only, John Lennon with his MVP.
I was running a Gene Stealer Cult triple battalion list with Twisted Helix Aberrants. The Aberrants were absolutely my most valuable unit of the weekend. In every game, they were able to kill, Blightlord Terminators, 60 Orc Boys. Whatever was required, I sent them in, and they always took care of business. Probably my highlight moment of the weekend was against Aaron from Team Smite Club. Aaron was a great guy and a great opponent, but unfortunately for him, I was able to get an Aberrant squad up to Strength 9 and got them into his Night Crusaders, and that took them out very quickly and really swung the game in my favor and let us win that round against, an excellent quality team.
All right, so Brohammer, Florida men, quick summary, 145-90, absolute curb stomping of Smite Club, who had been doing really good up until that point.
Yeah, that's got to be a tough loss for Smite Club. I know that they came in wanting to win, and they brought the pain with it, with Don Houston bringing his patented triple Disco Lord, triple Dorito Dread, triple Contemptor Dread list, Mark Wright coming out of Arizona with some Blood Angel Imperium jank. That must have been a tough loss for those guys.
Yeah, and it was pretty comprehensive. They had on the tables 4 of their players went down swinging. Daniel Olives holding it up though. He got the 1 win for Smite Club in that round. It should also be noted that at this point in the tournament, when friends of the show and SoCal Dream Team, Team Zero Comp, flamed out of the tournament by tying Needlessly Malicious, the second best named team in the entire event, 129-25. So that wraps up our round 5 coverage. Why don't we sneak on into round 6? So that sets up actually 4 teams in position to potentially snag a win. Actually, I don't know. Maybe you guys are spoiler here. So I guess you guys would not have been in the running, but you could ruin the day for Florida men. And then we also had the Wobbly Gentleman playing Quality Control. Now, what goes down in the Florida men matchup here, sort of in that first half of the bracket?
So we went in at this point, just trying to get the podium. So we just wanted to finish in the top 3. I drew Richard Martin's triple Orion gunships. I just kind of misplayed it completely. Got thrown off a little bit by the secondaries and tried to be a little bit overly aggressive and ended up biting me in the butt. Eddie was set up against Ruben Fernandez's Flyers, and we figure he gets the +1. He's got a 60% chance to win that roll-off. He should be able to go first, and then he gets seized on. So that completely flips the script on that plan. Josh Robert and John Lennon tie. Damien, I think, loses by 1 to Richard Siegler, and Mark Perry's able to hold Chris off, only letting him win by maybe 5 or 6 points.
Yowza. So winds up a 132 to 93 score there for the Florida men. Puts them in position potentially to win the whole thing. Let's hear about a favorite moment from Mark Perry.
So, best favorite moment in the game probably was against Chris Blackham in the final round against Amusement Park, was when had an unchargeable Warlock right there in the middle surrounded by 2 Flyers where I couldn't charge them because I would end up in range of the Flyers, so wasn't a valid charge target. But what I did was I took a Disco Lord, heroic in range of it, and then piled into the Warlock and killed the Warlock that way, took off, got me a kill, and took away a hold 1 for Chris. That was a most interesting play that I haven't actually ever done. I knew I was aware of it, I just never done it, so I was really happy to do that.
Thank you, Mark Perry, and may you finish on a top table again sometime soon, because I want more quotes from this guy.
Let me tell you what, a little known fact about Mark Perry is he can wrestle between 2 and 3 gators a day, depending on what he has for breakfast.
That's right. He's a true Florida man. Other top table here, we got Wobbly Gentleman playing Quality Control. So let's just do a quick overview here. You can watch all of the action on Pro Tabletop on Twitch. Also, everyone on these teams, every single one of them has a podcast, so they can talk in depth about all the things that go down. But I think what we can do here is maybe kick it over to Sean Naden. He's going to talk a little bit about maybe a little bit of a pairing snafu that Quality Control got into.
We fell in the end to the Wobbly Gentleman and my partners in crime, Austin Wingfield and Stephen Juice 4. So that was tough. We made a serious error and blunder in pairings that left us with a coin flip match that we did not win the coin flip. Kelsey versus the Knights. Obviously, if our Knight player goes first, we actually win the event, which would be awesome, but we did not. So we fell into a situation that was not great for the team, and it was a hole we could not come for. Overall, we feel like if we had flipped that matchup, we probably had a puncher's chance to win the event.
All right, so really feeling like the thing came down to that one dice roll. Although I did hear some other guys from the Wobbly Gentleman talking about how they still felt okay even if the Shadow Swords go second. I don't know how true that is.
Without having the Crast relic in there, they definitely still had that puncher's chance. I mean, you're never going to know now at this point, but you can hear more about it on Team Battle Brothers podcast that was released earlier this week.
Based on all of that, Wobbly Gentlemen catapult in front of Brohammer Florida Men. Brohammer Florida Men do wind up in second place. They have identical records, but less battle points. So it was, I guess they would have been 5. I always get this backwards. 5-0-1, 5-1-0.
I'm pretty sure it's 5-0-1.
5-0-1. So they both had a draw. The heroes of the ATC, Wobbly Gentlemen, and it made for some spicy, keeping it icy post-game interviews with the Long War guys. As we were saying, the Pro Tabletop is a great place to check this out if you actually want to hear what was going on. Chapter Tactics or Team Battle Brothers has Naden, Austin, and Juice again going over the whole event in depth. And finally, for more in-depth coverage of the Brohammer side of things, take a look at the Alpha Strike podcast interview with the one, the only John Lennon. Now, is he a bit more fired up for Alpha Strike than he was for us?
John's always kind of an even-keel guy. I don't think I've ever seen him overly happy or overly sad or overly angry.
Well, maybe we can get him fired up next time he's on the show. So, it's not always about the lists. Sometimes it's about the numbers. Why don't we kick it over to Bumper and get into some more deeper cuts on the American Team Championships.
Crack open those spreadsheets, nerds, because it's time to put the stats in Stats Center, courtesy of 40kstats.com.
After attending ATC, I was curious about a stat which I started calling the conversion. It works as follows. Player A scores 30 points in the game. Player B scores 10. The difference between the scores is plus 20 for player A's team, and that number is the only one ATC scoring cares about. Conversion rates are one more metric to add to those collected from team events. To get it, I needed a man, who is also a bird. Fortunately, I know one such being. You know him as the Falcon.
It's your boy Falcon, coming to you from the slick beaches of the Atlantic Ocean to dump some number knowledge in your noggins. In case you didn't already know, 40k Stats correspondent and resident robot lover Michael Timp asked me to do some research for him after the ATC. He was particularly interested in a stat that he called conversion rates, which is the average differential in points that each player had at the ATC. This is important as, by the nature of team events, the greater your points differential, the greater you helped your team in roasting your opponents. So, I went ahead and grabbed the data out of Best Coast Bearings with a special shout out to Garrett for fixing a bug that was preventing me from doing so, and threw together some tidbits for you. The top 25% of players, roughly 104, all had a points differential or conversion rate of 7 or greater. And of those top represented factions, Imperium sat at 21, Eldari multifaction was at 12, and Chaos was at 11. The Imperium lists tended towards some mixture of Imperial Knights and Guard, or Custodes Grav Tanks and Cult Mechanicus, plus Assassins, while Chaos was, your normal run-of-the-mill these days, Lord Discordant, Chaos Stroganoff lists, or the, Jim Vessel, TJ Lanigan style with Plague Bearers backed by Thousand Sun Smite spam, maybe some Death Guard, Blade Lord Terminators in the background. And Eldari, they, of course, have been running that amazing flyer spam, or some mix of Wave Serpents, Flyers, and Craft World tanks, namely Night Spinners and Fire Prisms. When it comes to the mono-faction performances, 8 of the top 100 lists were Tau. Orcs and Craft World Eldar had 7 lists in that top 100, and Chaos Space Marines had 6. I think something of note when you look at the individual player data is just how dominant the top 8 players were, averaging more than 21 more points than their opponents. Kevin Roach in particular was an absolute wrecking ball, not only going 6-0 at the event, but averaging 28.33 points more than his opponents. That's 4 more than the next closest player. I think we should take a quick moment and look through his list. So, Kevin here ran a Space Marines battalion, Imperial Fists with the Siegebreaker cohort. He brought a captain with a Power Axe, Stormbolter, and the Eye of Hypnoth, a librarian in Phobos armor. He was the warlord. 3 scout squads, a unit of Centurion Devastators, 6 of those. 5. And they all had Hurricane Bolters, double heavy bolter. He had an Imperial Bastion fortification, and he topped it off with that Custodes spearhead of Trajan, a shield captain on Jetbike, a Vexilla Magnifica Vexilla Sprader, and 3 Caladius Grav tanks. So it's a pretty messy list. If you look at it, those Centurion Devastators can put out a ton of damage as Imperial Fists, especially with the backup of that Librarian in Phobos armor, because depending on which Warlord trait he chooses, whether it's target priority to give them the +1 to hit, or if he decides to go with the Princess of Deceit to get the redeploy, if he ends up getting deployed at a disadvantage, it's just a baller gun line backed up by that Imperial Bastion for defense. But I'm really not the one that should be talking about this. I'm hoping you guys were able to get a hold of Kevin after you heard this little message and got him to shed some light on it, because I really am interested in seeing why it performed so well at a team event. Many of these units have shown some performance, some big performances on the big stage individually, but never together like this. I imagine he's going to say something about how he was able to avoid bad matchups, blah, blah, blah. But who am I to guess at greatness? So back to you, Booze.
We did, as a matter of fact, get a pretty detailed rundown of what Kevin Roach was running. Before we bring Kevin on here to sort of talk about his list, he also talks, I think, kind of expertly about the nature of skew lists in a team format. It's a good little segment. Anything else here you want to talk about? Anyone jumping off the page at you on these conversion rates?
In second place, like Falcon said, 4 points down, Charles Pugh playing Chaos. We've got Donovan Salo at Tau Empire, Simon Lean playing Sisters of Battle of all things, and coming in hot in fifth is Sean Naden himself.
Yep. Sean Naden, obviously not obviously, but he had an average point differential of 22.5. I mean, you could score well here without actually blowing your opponents out per se, if you also play good defense. So it's kind of an interesting way to actually think about the team game, wherein you want to obviously score as many points as you can, but you also don't want to have the score run up on you as well. So like if you get the 42 points, but your opponent somehow manages to score 35, well, you've really only scored a net 7 points for your team. It's kind of the idea there.
Oh, yeah. And to get a little bit of perspective here, the average on these is a minus 0.3, with yours truly coming in hot at that 1.5 mark. So I wasn't winning big, but I didn't tend to lose big either.
Yeah, that's not bad. Good way to call that out. Just rising above average. Luckily, Old Hef not in these particular stats. There you have it. Why don't we not belabor the point and bring on Mr. Roach for his analysis of his list and experience.
So the Centurion Bomb is a unit of Centurions with Hurricane Bolters and Heavy Bolters, and it requires 3 things to turn into an absolutely devastating combo. The first is you run the Centurions as Imperial Fists in a Siegebreaker Cohort detachment. The Siegebreaker Cohort detachment gives them access to a stratagem that says every 6 in the wound does a mortal wound to a vehicle. So it allows your bolters to absolutely destroy any vehicles they run into. You also get access to a relic that allows you to reroll 1s to wound in the shooting phase. You combine this with a +1 to hit modifier, generally from a Phobos Captain or Librarian, using the target priority Warlord trait, and the Bolter Drill stratagem, allowing you to generate attacks on a 6+. And then you need something to hide them in. I chose to use an Imperial Bastion because at T9... Alright, so stitching everything together, what you end up with is 90 shots, 30 Heavy Bolters, 60 Hurricane Bolters coming out of these Centurions. Every 5 and 6 turns into a new attack, and each attack's going to hit on a 2 with a reroll of 1 from a captain that's nearby. So if you're shooting all of your shots at one target, it's about 122 hits. Now you reroll 1s on the wound, and then every 6 turns into a mortal wound against a vehicle. So the Centurions are going to delete about 1.5 knights a turn pretty easily. But the real beauty of the list is that even against massive horde armies, you're going to just destroy them. And the Centurions, I played against one orc player who had 160 orcs, and they alone deleted about 45 orcs turn 1. So a lot of people have asked why I was using an Imperial Bastion. So you need to keep the Centurions off the table turn 1, and a lot of the lists that have been running around have been using a Land Raider Crusader. I switched to the Bastion originally because it's just cheaper. I think you save around about 70 points. But once I got on the table, I realized just how much of an improvement the Bastion is over the Land Raider Crusader. So it's got a much larger base, meaning if it gets destroyed, you have a lot more area to put the Bastions, or put the Centurions. It also means it's harder to wrap. So a lot of these assault armies that are out there are going to look at your Land Raider Crusader and think, oh, that's fantastic. Here's a nice, tough thing that I can wrap, keep in combat, and make sure you can never shoot me. Well, the fortification rules prevent that from happening. And overall, it's just a lot tougher. T9 at 20 wounds is something that your opponents just aren't going to put their shooting into. So I think what other players are going to see if they start running this Centurion Bomb is that against the right matchup, namely vehicles and hordes, they're going to lay out an absolutely withering amount of fire that their opponent's really going to struggle to keep up with. One of the reasons my games tended to be so lopsided, where I was not giving very many points to my opponent, were by the end of turn 1, I had really eliminated a lot of my opponent's ability to interact with me in the game. But I will warn people that I think the Centurion Bomb has incredible weaknesses, namely any negative to hit modifiers are quickly going to bring down the effectiveness, and there are some really big meta lists out there that rely on minus to hit modifiers. Eldar Flyers and Plague Bearers stick out to me. So I really would not recommend this list in a singles format. There are a few tricks I found that really help the Centurions on the field. One is you can use Field Commander to get a Warlord trait that will give the Centurions cover even in the open. This is amazing into low AP weaponry because it'll help that 2-up armor save stick and keep your Centurions on the table. The other is to use Caladiuses, one, because they're just ridiculous, but two, because they can form a shield around your Centurions to keep them from getting charged. And the support that you're going to take, namely Trajan, has access to the Tanglefoot grenade stratagem to also help assault armies from getting to your Centurions. Another is to take a Phobos Librarian, one for the target priority trait that they need to get the +1 to hit, but also for Mind Raid to help you with CP, and Tenebrous Curse to also really lay the hurt on those assault armies.
All right, so there we go. Thank you very much, Kevin, for your insights on that stomper of a list. Sort of a "don't try this at home, kids" message, I think, from Kevin on that one.
We'll see if anybody listens. I'm sure half the field was green with envy at his score.
Hey, before we wrap up our ATC coverage, I'd like for us to pause and honor a completely arbitrary award that we'll start handing out called the Overperforming Underperformer of the Week. In this segment, we shout out a crazy person running a monofaction list against all odds. Who better to be the first weekly recipient that one of 40k's finest humans, a man who was 21st in conversion percentage at the ATC, and for whom I still feel a little bit guilty for winning Best Sports Over at Warzone Atlanta because I pressured Adam Abramowitz to give me full points in the final round. That's right. Number 1 in your hearts. Number 8 in the warp. The one. The ho-dog. Horton Doughton.
My name is Horton Doughton, and today I'm here to tell you about my corn army. The thing that makes this list special is, first of all, that it's pure corn. I've dedicated everything to have Mark of Corn and gone with a high mechanized list in order to present the maximally durable army I can to weather enemy shooting in close combat. This army is also very flexible in that it has a lot of guns I can fire at range, or lots of close combat weapons I can use up close, which allows me to hurl skulls from afar or take them up close. This provides a lot of flexibility and helps me to defeat hordes just as well as mechanized lists with relative ease. It certainly has its weaknesses, but it's a blast to play. The MVPs of this list have to go to the Defilers. Their flexibility in terms of being able to sit at 72 inches and fire their battle cannon when need be, or run up the field and punch out things such as enemy knights or Blightlord Terminators or even Plague Bearers, lets them take the field and dominate any game that they're in, unless they're hit by a volcano cannon or some such like. They're also their durability, because of having 14 wounds, is a huge benefit, and because they heal a single wound every turn, and the fact that their weapon skill never degrades, and the Lord Discordance able to boost them +1 weapon skill, means that even when they're down to a single wound, or even 2 wounds in the lowest tier, they still hit extremely hard. The reason I'm so excited to be playing this army is because of the ITC Monofaction Awards. When Khorne Demonkin went away at the beginning of 8th edition, I was not a happy camper. But now that ITC has created the Monofaction Award, I feel like I can compete amongst other Khorne players who are all seeking the Crimson Crown. This has me excited, as I've defined my own parameters of victory, and I'm less concerned about how I do overall in a tournament, and more worried about simply doing as best as I can with the army that I want to play. And that's the wonderful thing about the Monofaction Awards for ITC, and I'm going to chase it all year long, because I've found that it's simply the most fun way to play.
There you go, guys. There's someone who's definitely fired up about the changes to the monofaction stuff in the ITC. There's a guy who's out there chasing it. He's gunning for corn. I'm glad he's got a dog in the fight again. With all that said, I think that wraps our ATC coverage 2019. We'll see y'all again in 2020.
Tournament news.
Scary here from Scardcast, and you are listening to Stats Center.
And now we move over to the Lone Star State for Warzone Houston. Or maybe that should be Loner Star State. Am I right, Tony?
Oh, yes. While the rest of the Western Warhammer world went to war as a band of brothers in celebration of teamwork and camaraderie, all the players that didn't have any friends went over to Texas.
The second to last event in the Texas series before Wargames Con next month, we find a familiar face and an interloper waiting for us at the top table.
Firstly was familiar war boss Nick Sutherland, who brought out his hella shooty orcs, again basically unchanged to what won the Desert Rat GT a few weeks ago. His MVP was no surprise to him either.
My MVP this time was definitely the Relic Shock Mech again. Points for points, I think it's the best model out of any codex, especially whenever you're burning 4 CP on it, sometimes 5 CP a turn. It just is, it has, even if you, so the stats say if you roll a 7 for strength and a 7 for number of shots, you're going to pick up, and you have more Daka cast on it, you're picking up an Elder Flyer. And that's just average rolls. Whenever you combine it with Big Killaboss, you're wounding so much stuff on 2s. It's just absolutely ridiculous the damage output that this unit has. My dice were extremely hot for it the whole tournament, so it was just picking up 2 units a turn again.
So yeah, I think your mileage may vary with a shock attack gun. We actually got through the Chapter Tactics Patreon, one of the fine people there has run a lot of simulations just looking at the insane variance and swings that a shock attack gun actually has, especially the Relic shock attack gun. So maybe one day we'll talk about that on the show. And you may recall that Nick's win came in spite of a devastating Xenos on Xenos title match that wound up in a draw. This prompted vanquished Antonio Dino Cedeno to menacingly announce to the 40k world that he was, quote, coming for Nick Sutherland at Warzone Houston. Well, Dino found Nick in the 4th round all right, and our very own Peter the Falcon thought it was Dino's game to win. So we reached out to him to find out how that went.
So I know Pete says that on paper the Necrons should be able to take this match, but with it being a dice game, you never know what's going to happen. Nick and I have talked several times since the Desert Rat GT and at this last event, discussing what mission benefits who more and what maps we need for those missions. But it always comes down to the Necrons needing first turn in order to survive the firepower of 15 Ludas, 12 Smasher guns, 2 shotguns, and 1 Relic shock attack gun.
So I played Dino again in the 4th round. I mean, it's not personal. I mean, anytime that Texas is going to travel to out-of-state tournaments, we're all going to rep the same team, so we're extremely cool. The reason why the game was so lopsided was we were playing a deploy first, go first mission, and I was able to seize on him. I had my Ludas in teleporter, so I wasn't even able to unleash my full fury of offensive firepower. But T1, I was able to pick up all 3 Doomsize. T2, I was able to pick up 30 Immortals and 9 Tesla Blades.
Oh my. So Dino goes down swinging. And as for Nick's opponent on the top table, round 5, William Ivey was running a mighty shooty guard with Blood Angels characters list. Let's hear him talk about it a little bit.
I run a brigade and battalion of Cadians with a supreme detachment of Blood Angels with a Librarian Dread and 2 Death Company captains. I ran Cadians over my usual Catachan due to the popularity of Chaos. My list doesn't have assassins in it, which I was debating on this for a while and opted not to run them, and ran my Librarian Dreadnought instead of 3 captains for the -4 attacks against the Knights and Flyers when I fought them, and the extra Astropath for Nice Shroud and 9 Bulgrin instead of 8. I enjoyed playing my Dreadnought once again, but at the end of this event, it showed I needed to have that assassin. I think out of my list, my Bulgrin were the MVP, mainly for the amount of times they survived throughout the games I played, only to end up losing the whole squad on 2 games. When I did lose them, they ended up staying alive until the very end of the rounds. They were able to bully their way through the units they ran into, and either holding the center or pushing into my opponent's deployment zone, causing issues for them. I would like to honorably mention one of my Smash captains were able to triple swing into my teammates Sean Prosser's Hive Guard in Game 3 by making his Hive Tyrant kill the captain to swing for the 3rd time, killing all of his Hive Guard turn 1. Was too much fun to pass up doing that.
I'm like a little suicide mission for a Smash captain.
Well, you always know that the Blood Angels graduate directly from Scout to Smash Captain.
That's right.
It didn't come as much of a surprise to either player with what unfolded next.
Going into Game 5 against Nick, I knew I was going to have an issue with his list since I didn't have an assassin. Rolling for who went first, he was able to go first and I failed to seize. It was an uphill battle for me, but I did all that I could to keep up with him. My Bulgaren had a lot of work clearing up all the boys that were coming at me from all sides, while shaking off quite a bit of shots from the mech guns and the looters throughout the game, which showed him the resilience of the Bulgaren as I finally lost them by the end of 5. The event itself was awesome. I got to play against some great players. John and his crew were great, and I'm definitely going back to Warzone Houston next year.
Well, all right. William does wind up going down swinging on the top table of Warzone Houston. But let's hear a little bit more from Nick. He's just going to talk about his experience and what he thought gave him the edge this weekend.
At the Warzone Houston GT, I had pretty favorable matchups. I got a pretty standard Dark Elder list with a grotesque bomb, and then I had the Necron meta list, and then I had 3 variations of guard parking lot. If you're taking guard parking lot to even come close to beating my list, you have to have an assassin in it. And in round 5, I didn't have an assassin going against me, so I was just able to pick up all the vehicles by turn 2 and then just outrange him.
There it is. Pretty smooth sailing. Now, I'm noticing a very shooty quality to the top table here, and even the 4th round. Are you noticing that as well, Tony?
It does seem that everyone brought out the guns here in Texas, but I just figured that was a Texas thing.
Could be the Texas thing. Could also be part of the Texas thing that the terrain on the tables maybe reflected maybe some stereotypical images that we have of Texas in our mind. Why don't we talk to Nick about the terrain?
At Warzone Houston, the terrain was very, very light. So I had a shooting gallery. It was, I played on the top table for the final 3 rounds, so I had the same terrain for all 3 rounds, and there was no way to hide a knight. There was no way to hide. I mean, it was very favorable terrain for me. There was 4 ruins on it and about 4 or 5 hills, but that was it.
So there you go. The second MVP of Nick's list this week goes to the terrain. But congrats on going back to back, and we'll leave off with him setting up what's coming up next in Texas, because as you all probably know if you listen to the show, there's a bit of a circuit going on.
So the Texas circuit is 5 tournaments. To score best in Texas, you have to only 3 tournaments count towards your score. So currently, me and Matt Ali each have 2 first out of the 4 tournaments that have been played so far. Colin McDade has a second and a 4th, and Dino has a second and something very, very close to a 4th. So basically, it's came down to a 4-man race. If any of us 4 score first, we have a good chance of winning the Texas circuit. So War Games Con is going to be a very intense.
So there you have it. It turns out that Dino has another chance to take out Nick, this time for all the chalupas. And also, I would say that something like War Games Con, maybe you're going to see some more out-of-state players coming up to try and mess with Texas.
Maybe some of those Florida men will make their way over to that Sunshine State.
I guess from their Sunshine State.
Tournament news.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Murphy from Forge the Narrative, and you're listening to 40k Stat Center.
As we've completed the first half of the team tournament season, it's time for us to introduce a new segment, Better Known ETC Team. And what better place to start with than those lovable scamps, Team England.
Of course, as we all know, this is a very important event for Team England, as it would likely be the last opportunity for them to win before Boris Johnson unhinges his jaw and swallows the entirety of the UK in one chewless bite.
The stakes are so high that a country with arguably the most top-level 40k talent decided to bring along an American mercenary.
Full disclosure, this interview was done, like all UK podcast interviews, in the trunk of a car driving down the highway at maximum speed. I've attempted to clean it up, but it might be a little hard on our autophile fan base. That being said, Josh provides some great insights, and I'm told he rarely does interviews, and basically stop whining and take what we give you.
Hey guys, we're here with Josh Roberts, the captain of the English ETC team. So, is this your first ATC experience?
My first ATC, yeah.
And how did you like it?
It was really good. I mean, Chris has been bugging me to try and come over to some more US events. I did Adepticon 2011, 2012, was a while ago. Enjoyed that. Haven't had a chance to come back. Chris was saying, oh, you should try Nova, should try LVO, should try all the big events he was listing. And then he said, oh, actually, we have a place on our ATC team. Would you like to join us? I thought, oh, that sounds cool. I like team events. I mean, I'm the English captain for the ETC, so I thought it would be interesting to come along, see what the meta's like, play here, and also just a new experience as well.
So how do you feel about the American meta versus the European meta, ATC versus ETC?
So I think the meta's definitely different, and a big part of that is the missions. Because we don't play a lot of ITC in the UK, a lot of our tournaments are still more an ETC scoring system, an ETC style of system. That changes how the lists are developed because the missions are so different. As there is more ITC events happening now in the UK, which will start to move people's meta. If they want to play in those events, they'll start to realize certain things you would take in the ETC or an ETC mission, you wouldn't necessarily take in an ITC pack because of the kill more, hold more style of scoring. And I think the other big one is the fact that you guys have more Forge World. We don't have a lot of Forge World anywhere near as much. Maybe 60% of our tournaments don't allow it. The ones that do have limits. I think that changes the meta massively as well. Like in your last game, you played 3 of the Orion Flyer as well. You don't see those in the UK. You might see 1. I think I've seen 1 before. But you don't see 3 because a lot of the tournaments, even if they do allow Forge World, may be limited to say 1,000 points. Apart from some of the new ITC missions that are coming through now. So it just changes the game for sure. It's different. It's not like having an extra rule set on top.
And then now that the ETC lists are live, is there anything that surprised you about anything any of the other countries are taking?
So normally, I think each year you normally look through all the lists and go, oh, that's quite clever. I missed that, or oh, how do we not think of that? Whereas this year, I feel like we're quite happy as a team that we've looked through all the lists and gone, actually, I don't feel like we've missed anything. There's some options we didn't choose to take. So, like, we haven't taken Necrons, for example, and we know that with the points changes and within an 8-man team, Necrons are actually a decent, viable option now. But we considered them and felt that it wasn't in the strongest 8 for us. But I know other teams, like the American team, has taken a Necron list, and it definitely has a place on the team if you feel it fits within your group of armies and what roles you see them each doing. So I don't think there's any of that. The only ones that I will say just look crazy are some of the Russian lists. They have a bit of a reputation for that, though. Their lists are always just different. They just look strange on paper. Like they have a Grey Knight, Dark Angel, Space Wolf list, which you look at it and go, I don't see what I'm missing when I look at that list and go, it's got some tricks in there, like stacking the 2 -1s to hit on a big target, so they made it -2. It's got bits and pieces in there, but it still doesn't look like the most efficient list. Maybe I'm wrong, and he might score really well at ETC, but you look at it and go, it just looks like an odd list rather than, oh wow, that's a meta list that we've missed. Whereas, like say in previous years, I remember when sometimes certain teams will come up with a list that people just don't see coming, and then it scores really well because that's the holy grail of the ETC. If you can develop a list, that if you know that there are armies that people generally defend with, and if you can develop a list that they don't realize beats that list, so they end up, oh, I can play that, and then they pick it, then it just gives you such an advantage in the pairing. I remember, I think it was a few years ago, but it was maybe 5th edition. The Polish did that. They were the first time they brought like a Gene Stealer heavy list in that, and in that meta, like the Guard gun line with the Hydras and the Vendettas was a really popular list, really powerful, hard to counter. And then this Gene Stealer Horde list with the list as it was at the time, nobody was running it. They were the first to really run it at an event. People were putting that against the Guard, and Guard were like, oh, it's just Gene Stealers, I can play that. And then I think he played, out of his 6 games, I think he played Guard 5 times because none of the teams had worked out what his list did. And I think he scored like 113 out of 120 points. So he just, because his army was just so good against that army, and the rest hadn't caught up to that meta yet. No, actually, they've clearly developed this list to play that, and others didn't realise.
Do you think any of the improvements that ETC has made on the terrain has impacted the way that people build lists for it now?
Yeah, massively for sure. I mean, like for us as a team, so for anybody who doesn't know, the ETC, because it's an 8-man team, and there's 8 tables, there's 8 table maps, and that is how the terrain will be for every row. So we know exactly what table 1 should look like. There'll be some variation, of course, with there's no guarantee that every single terrain piece will be the same exact size, but generally they have a set size for each type of terrain piece, and what it shouldn't do, how tall it should be, how wide it should be, and that then means that we can plan our pairings and we can plan our armies around. Okay, well, I know this type of army needs a heavy board. It can play on tables, say for example, tables 1 and 2 are super heavy. Tables 3, 4, 5, 6 should be medium boards, and then tables 7 and 8 are light boards. And then again, the table 1 is super heavy. Table 8 is really light. So there's the complete spectrum, and then you can design lists around that. Okay, how do we, as a foot forward army? Okay, I want to play on a gun line, like say an Admech gun line or a Tau gun line. Okay, I'm going to pick table 8, the lightest board there. Which armies are going to prey on me on that type of board? Because a lot of armies struggle against that type of gun line if they can't hide anything. You can hide a little bit, but not a lot on table 8. It's very open. The reverse is table 1. Somebody like a Gene Stealer cult list, or say a Guard indirect fire list, which has got like lots of Withens and mortars, and then they've got smash captains or shield captains for support. They can go, okay, well, I'll pick table 1, you can't see me, and then I've got combat threat, and then indirect, or like G-Seal Cult, I'm just going to control the whole board. You're not going to want to come anywhere near my rocks or acolytes or multiple. The metas, double aberrance is really popular. It seems to be quite popular over here as well. Things like that go, well, if you can't see me, I'm going to control this whole board, which for the ETC, with the way the mission scoring works, is yes, you get points for kill points and things like that, but actually, if you control a board, you can kill nothing and win the game big. Because if you're Maelstrom, okay, I'm holding more objectives, I'm scoring cards. A lot of the Maelstrom missions will be some of them where you draw cards for the number of objectives you're on. So board control is so big, and for a list like those, if they can't just get shot off, that can be really, really powerful. And then on the reverse of that, we have to think then when you're designing lists to prey on armies, go, okay, well, we think they might put this forward, we think they might put that forward. Okay, well, somebody like, say, demons or other armies or orcs might say, oh, well, I can play Tau, but on that barren board, that's actually really difficult for me. It changes the whole complexion. And the same for like G-Seal Cult. Oh yeah, I can play G-Seal Cult, but I can't see him, and I've got to out-combat him. Can I out-combat him? A lot of armies can't. So it's good that we've got all the tables, but then it does cause some headaches about how to design lists. Okay, well, how do we deal with that? Because certain lists can really abuse terrain.
When you guys are designing your list for the ETC, are they more player driven, or do you just kind of what you need to build for, what you need to bring, kind of deal, and you assign it to someone?
So different captains have different ways of doing that. So I know some captains are more authoritarian, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, and they'll go, "This is what I want the team to do," and then players have to work around that. I've always found there's a little bit of that, but you've got to have players happy on what they're playing. I think players play better with armies that suit them, that they enjoy, because they're going to practice more with it, they're going to play more with it. I mean, particularly with ETC, because the ETC meta is its own thing in that because it's not a singles event, so you do get more extreme builds, and because everybody can't duplicate codexes, you get some more in what would be a singles tournament. Well, why would you take maybe Necrons to try and win a singles event, or why would you take say like a Horde list like the Americans are taking ETC? Would you win a singles event with that? Maybe, but it's probably difficult to. But as a role in an ETC environment, it has a very particular role. It can do very well. Now, of course, the balance then with the players is this year's been a little bit different because GW is so much faster with their releases. The meta keeps evolving, and there's new codexes all the time. But traditionally, you build through the year to prepare for the ETC. So you've got to have your players playing something they like. Because I mean, for a lot of my players, and I'm sure it's the same with other teams, but the biggest event for them is the ETC. So some of them will sacrifice their singles chances, if you will. They can still do well because they'd all take a good list, but they might sacrifice the potential of how well will they podium with it, because they'll be taking a list that they know they're trying to develop for the ETC. When they know that, okay, well, I could take Imperial Suit with all the toys, or I could take a Chaos Suit with all the toys. They're not doing that singles because they're practicing their list. Whereas if you force them onto an army, a lot of people will play as minimum games as possible, and then when you go to an event, particularly the ETC, when it gets to the business end of the round, sometimes that one mistake costs you the whole team result, and then that's massive. That can throw your whole ETC out. So I try and let players have an input, and then once I've got an idea of what everybody wants to play, then I'll look at what that looks like as an 8, and then try and work out, okay, that looks like we've got too many put forwards, we haven't got enough armies that can go out and get us points, or no, it looks like we've got around, we've got loads of like really aggressive lists, but actually we've got nothing to put forward, nothing to defend with. Okay, we just need to adjust the balance. So then I'll go away and look at each of the lists and go, okay, well, this list can probably do that a bit better. You can, something like, say, Genestealer Cult, you can probably go a bit more aggressive, because in an 8-man team, you can avoid some of the matchups that in a singles event, you might hit, like, you might not want to play Flyer, Eldar, things like that. Whereas if you know you can avoid that, you don't have to try and cater for it. Just go, okay, well, if I get that pairing, I'll lose 20-0, but I'll make my list better at playing all the other options I want to play to maximize your result. And then other lists, you might go, okay, well, how can we make that list more maximizing the terrain? Okay, you can go forward with this terrain. You know you can play pretty much anybody and get points up. So it's finding that balance. And then the final one will be is once we start to get closer to the ETC, and then we know that there's no more FAQs from GW. We know that all the lists are pretty much, all list options are set. Okay, this looks really powerful. If that looks like it might be a put forward list, do we have 2 answers to it? And then if we've got any glaring holes in our team makeup, then we go, okay, we need to adjust something. We're lacking with, if they put forward an AdMech gunline, we don't have 2 answers for it, so we're giving their defender a free win, which is not what you want to try and do. So I try and have a little bit of balance, player driven, but then tweaked depending on what we need the team to do.
All right, thanks, Josh. This has been Tony with 40k Stats Center and the start of our ETC Spotlight. Thanks.
How do you feel, Tony? How was the co-hosting chair?
Just thankful for the opportunity, Val.
Hey, you showed good hustle out there. You finished all your plays, and your team's called Abusement Park, and I think it's really funny.
Well, next year we'll be doing it for the Queen.
Thank you to everyone who's made it this far, and if you have any idea how to fix levels and you think I suck, please reach out, because every time I hear my own voice, it sounds pretty balanced to me.
Thank you also to the growing group of international correspondents. If you've messaged us in the past and you did not hear from us this week, it's not that we don't like you, it's that we're just bad at organizing our messages. Please ping us again, because we're definitely going to need you in the upcoming weeks.
So next week we've got, how many, Tony?
7.
That's right. 7 majors and GTs to highlight and bring to you all. Conveniently, the Vulcan is on vacation, so who the hell knows who's going to tell you about them, but hey. I will, of course, be at TGX this weekend for Toronto's first major event. Not quite sure if that's true, but I'm saying it anyway, and I can't wait to put that at the start of the show, regardless of how many more important things have happened. Town, anything else?
The Show Me Showdown is coming this week, somewhere in the middle of the damn country. Watch for Bam on the Iron Halo GT stream. He should be playing Game 1. We've got Warzone Gigabytes coming down in Atlanta on August 10th. Capital City Clash in Columbia, South Carolina on August 24th. And then, of course, Nova's 10th anniversary to top it off, August 29th through September 3rd.
Did you say Capital City Clash on August 24th?
Yes.
That's different from the Capital City Bloodbath on August 24th?
Apparently so.
Those scumbags. I'm also not 100%. I'm pretty sure it's August 24th. That is funny to me. America, jeez, you can't let us have anything. Capital City Bloodbath, late August. Gonna be real good, real big, real awesome. Well,
at this point, I think it's the TOs are conspiring against us.
Could be. I wouldn't be surprised if they're all getting together. It's the hot and heavy summer. We'll be into the doldrums of the fall soon enough. And aside from that, I guess there's only one thing left to say.
Get good, 40K.
Bye-bye.
This has been 40K Stats Center, a presentation of the Frontline Gaming Podcast Network. Like what we do? Subscribe to and rate us on YouTube and wherever podcasts can be found. Join the conversation. Follow 40K Stats Center on Facebook. You can also support the show directly by joining the Chapter Tactics Patreon and competitive 40K in general via the ITC Patreon or by grabbing a subscription to BCP.